who are doing the studies on the impact of environment on Earth, on the impact of temperature rise on the Earth, and they say that if there's a increase of 1.5 degrees temperature on the surface of the Earth, that will reduce the fresh water by 9%. 9% across, which means some pockets will have a much higher deficiency. They might not have sufficient amount of water for sustaining their own lives. So it's a very, very tricky and very, very critical phenomena which is happening, which is basically the change in climate. And this is also leading to an increase in the heat waves and storms. And the estimate is that if we reach 1.5 degrees increase of temperature, there will be almost 30 to 35% increase in the storms, tides, heat waves, and other things, which are basically the natural calamities which our country anyway is facing every year. So this has been the just a pictorial representation of the this increase of the surface temperature of Earth. It was slow 1870 till 1930, 1940. It was not so high. From 1940 onwards, when the industrialization increased very fast. If you recall, this 1940 is the year when this World War II also started, 1939 to be very precise. And from the beginning of the World War II, the industrialization rate has been extremely high. Now, industrialization, how does it hurt us? When you make more industries, you manufacture more, you need energy. When you need energy, you have to burn something to either produce electricity or to run a car or a vehicle or an aircraft or a tank or whatever it is. So from 1939, 1940 onwards, this burning of the energy resources like coal, like petrol, like diesel, all this is ramping up like anything, and this is leading to a very fast increase in this temperature of the surface of Earth. So there have been efforts by various countries putting together the conventions are there that let us not go totally reckless in just burning the fuel, because these fuels have a finite life. We don't have infinite sources of fuel, and therefore not only the burning is exhausting our fuels, but burning is also adding to the surface temperature of Earth. So there was a big convention in 2015 in Paris, where we were also the signatory. India was also the signatory, and it has been decided that the temperature increase will be restricted to 1.5 degrees centigrade, and thereafter we have to manage in a way that we are not adding anything further to the climate which would increase the temperature. Now, how can that be done? That can be basically done by restricting the burning of the normal fossil fuels. So we'll come to that a little later. Now, what causes the surface temperature to increase, or I would say what causes the climate change due to human activities? Now, what happens is, first of all, I'll just touch upon what are the products which are produced when the human activity increases, when we are running the car, when we are using the electricity. All these things, anywhere we are traveling in the plane, whatever we do, ultimately some energy is used by us, and by burning some kind of energy resource, and that produces 4 or 5 typical greenhouse gases. I'll explain what is greenhouse gases. First, I'll just name the biggest one is carbon dioxide, followed by methane, water vapors, and nitrous oxide. Now, what happens is when the sun rises, there is a sunlight falls on the surface of the Earth, and it gets reflected. Part of it gets reflected, part of it gets absorbed. Now, these 4 or 5 gases, which are called greenhouse gases, they create kind of a cushion. They make a blanket kind of a layer, which prevents the escape of the reflected light back into the atmosphere. Slowly and slowly, that remains with this, gets accumulated and starts increasing the temperature of the Earth. So basically, the biggest cause of climate change is the addition of these greenhouse gases, which in turn again is done by us because we are burning the fossil fuels. Now, what activities basically contribute to the increase in the greenhouse gases? production and burning of coal for production of electricity and other industrial purposes. Like coal is not only used for thermal power plants for generating electricity. We also require for making steel out of the iron ore, and so many other applications are there where the coal is used. But ultimately, when it is burnt, it produces methane, it produces carbon dioxide, and partly water vapors also. Then production and burning of natural gas, and also the gas which we are using in our kitchen. Production and burning of transport fuels like petrol and diesel. We very well know we are using our cars on daily basis. We are also traveling by aircrafts. We are also traveling by trains and all those things. And this also adds to the volume of carbon dioxide, methane into the atmosphere. Then livestock and other agriculture activities. The livestock like the farm animals, all these, and then when we grow the paddy, we burn the stubble of the paddy crop. All these are all adding to ultimately the increase in the levels of the carbon dioxide within the atmosphere. Then if in the cities we have huge piles of garbage. You would be seeing it, going around everywhere. It is there, and what it does slowly when it decays, it produces methane. Methane, as you can see, methane is one of the greenhouse gases. And of course, another thing which has happened is a reduction in forest cover, which also only we are responsible, because what we do is we just cut down the trees and make our own maybe new city, new industry, or whatever new it comes up. So why reduction in forest cover hurts us is because it's very clear that if the forest is there, it will convert at least the carbon dioxide into oxygen. The more the trees, the higher is the conversion of carbon dioxide into the oxygen. But reduction in forest cover means the average amount of carbon dioxide getting converted into oxygen reduces. So this is what is the effect of increase in human activities on Earth. Now we'll see how various places this energy is consumed. Ultimately, we consume the energy like electricity or petrol, and then once we use it, the carbon dioxide is increased, methane is increased. So we'll see what is the pattern of this energy consumption worldwide. If you see this slide, from 2000 to 2016, there has been an increase. Steady increase in the production of energy as well as consumption of energy. Now, from a 420 ecojoules in 2000, we have increased to 576. It's almost, you would say, 30% jump in the consumption production. And now we'll see which are the sources of energy which are contributing to the production. The coal is, if you see year 2000, or maybe we can see year 2016, coal contributed out of 576, 156, oil 184, natural gas 127, nuclear 28.5, and renewables contributed 80.6. This is the absolute quantity, and in terms of percentage, you would say that renewables is just about 15% of the total energy that we are producing. Now, if you see the consumption patterns in 2016, continent-wise, there is a reason for me to show you this continent-wise consumption. You look at Europe. You look at Americas. They are although showing only 13% and 15% consumption. But when I go to the next slide, you will understand why this is there. Africa is only 24.9 ecojoules. Americas is 92.4. Asia is 170, highest. But does it really reflect into what we are discussing? Europe is 75.5. Oceania means Australia and New Zealand, the other continent, is 4.04 ecojoules only. And worldwide, it was 367 ecojoules. Now, this is what I wanted to show. Asia, although has the highest consumption, but if you see as a percentage in terms of the manpower or the population, energy consumption share is 46%, but energy consumption per capita is only 36,000 megajoules. Africa is only 18,000 megajoules. Europe and Americas and Australia, you see it is 1,90,000 or 94,000. Basically, they are the developed countries and they are developed continents. They already, the lifestyles are such, almost 95% of the population everybody has a car, everybody has a, air conditioning at his or her residence. They are like, all the facilities are available, which are basically energy intensive. Means a lot of energy is required to keep these kind of gadgets going, it's very clear, like air conditioners, like, big size cars and all those things. But if you see in comparison, Africa has only about 18,000 megajoules consumption, and it is only about 6.8% of the total energy consumption share. Now, against the population, which is 17%, consumption is only 6.8%. Do you understand that there is a huge margin over here for Africans to, slowly develop themselves, become at the level of Europe, and therefore their energy consumption requirement is going to go up like anything. Similarly, if you see Asia, energy consumption share is 46%, whereas the population share is 59%. So there is a huge gap in Asia also. People have to catch up to the living styles of Europe, which means we will burn more petrol, we will burn more coal to produce energy, electricity, and therefore what is going to happen? The next thing is that it will increase the greenhouse gases, and which will in turn increase the surface of the temperature. So surface of the temperature of the surface of the earth. So the point is that there is going to be a huge growth, whether it is industrial, whether it is the consumption in houses, the energy consumption in commercial places. The consumption is going to go up. Therefore, you need more and more energy for running these things, and you are going to burn all of it. Ultimately, you will be contributing to the increase in temperature of the surface of Earth. Now, what is the scenario as to where are we heading right now? Which is a very important thing you see. So, global coal reserves, which are have been estimated by the geologists, are at about 10,54,782 million metric tons. And yearly global consumption as of 2020 is approximately 8,561 million metric tons. Similarly, if we see the other major source of energy, that is petroleum, the total reserves are at, if we just keep counting, it will be a huge number, but then the yearly consumption is almost about equivalent to what about 9 to 10% of the total reserves. So the point is, if we conclude based on whatever we have seen till now, the coal will last for about 133 years from today if the consumption remains at 8,561 million metric tons. And if the population is increasing, if the industrial growth has to happen in Africa, industrial growth, and the lifestyle has to improve in Asia, this is going to get finished off much faster. Similarly, petroleum will last for about 47 years. We don't have much time for the petroleum, which means the conventional cars, the conventional aeroplanes, they'll not be operational after about 50 years because we would have exhausted all of petroleum by then. And seeing the figures which I just shared with you, the consumption of energy in Asia and Africa is set to grow. There is no other option. Maybe Europe doesn't require any additional energy, the same level which they are right now. But Asia and Africa, the consumption, the demand of energy will continue to grow, so that till the time they are at the levels of Europe and America, which is natural because everybody would like to be equally opulent or equally wealthy or equally well off. So the efforts will go on from Asians and the Africans to improve their lifestyle and ultimately reach the levels of Europe and America. So if we see, we have the coal, which is limited, which is going to exhaust in 133 years. We have petroleum, which is limited, which is going to exhaust in 47 years. So what else? We have to look for some alternate sources of energy, which may be in a way be continuous. It should not so happen we find it out and we exhaust not there. Fourth is the greenhouse gases need to be restricted to prevent further global warming, and the alternate energy option is the renewable energy resource, so that we restrict the production of greenhouse gases. Now, we are in a contradictory situation. The growth is bound to happen because a lot of population of the world is to catch up to the living standards of Europe. And we also have to restrict the emission of greenhouse gases, and therefore we have to reduce the consumption of conventional fuel. So we have to look for something which doesn't produce greenhouse gases and therefore doesn't harm the environment and doesn't impact the climate change. So that takes us to the next section. So something which is renewable, which doesn't get exhausted with time, which we use it and it is again there. We use it, it is again there. So if you see in the nature what we have, what we basically consume, we have sunlight, we have air, we have water, which are always there. And if we can find ways and means to extract energy out of these 3-4 basic elements of Earth, probably we can be victorious in the end. There will be no further damage to the climate, and the life will go on much more happily. So that takes me to the renewable energy resources which are there. Now there are primarily 5-6 renewable energy resources which I've listed down. I'll speak about them one by one. First is solar energy, second is the wind energy, third is hydro energy, fourth is biomass energy, fifth is geothermal energy, and sixth is the tidal energy. Now, each of these resources have got their own challenges, which I will explain once I go to those slides. I have few pictorial representation. The solar energy parks, who are basically producing electricity in these parks, they look like this. The one is on this one is on the ground. The other solar energy park is on a lake. So you have floating solar parks and you have ground mounted solar parks. Now solar energy is very good. You don't burn any coal, you don't burn any petrol, and the sun is always available. But what is the challenge? Why it is that it is not there everywhere? Because sun rises at about 6:30 to 7. The time also changes year on year. I mean month on month, and it sets in at about 7 p.m. 6 to 7 p.m. So what do we do? So we stop using the stop consuming the energy at 7 o'clock in the night. What do we do? So this is the problem with the renewable energy. They are not regular, they are not consistent, they can't be stored. You cannot store this energy. Unlike petrol or diesel or coal, which is you can store and keep burning slowly and slowly. But you cannot store solar energy. You have to use it and it gets consumed by the consumers like us. Similarly, you have this wind energy. If you see, there are two, I've basically placed two photographs. One is showing in the sea, the other is on the ground. If you see the wind energy basically is, again, there is a wind energy is similar to solar energy. It is also not regular. Winds don't blow continuously. The winds sometimes in a particular season they would blow more. In another particular season they would blow much less, and therefore you would not be able to get the required amount of energy. But what happens? If you go to the wind park which is in the sea, there is a distinct advantage. The amount of wind which flows in the sea is much higher and much more consistent. It continues for a much longer period. Yet it is not available for 24 hours. Similarly, solar is not available for 24 hours. Therefore, the methods are required to be developed so that we can store these energies. For storing these energies, there are new technologies being developed. One of them is a simple, battery storage, which is not getting developed very rapidly for both these sources of energy. So this takes us to the next type of renewable energy. Now, then we have biomass and hydro energy. Now, biomass is what? Biomass is basically whatever are the animal waste or husk or whatever is left out of, the used part of the food and all those things. And that is recycled and is then it is burnt ultimately to produce electricity. Although it is renewable, but strictly speaking, this biomass cannot be considered as the eco-friendly energy. It is renewable because as long as humans are there, as long as animals are there, as long as livestock is there, as long as agriculture is there, you will keep producing the waste, whether animal waste, human waste, or agriculture waste, and you can keep using it for producing electricity or any other form of energy. But ultimately, you have to burn it. When you burn it, you again produce the greenhouse gases. So it is renewable, but it is not eco-friendly. So this is not one of the very popular options. The fourth form of energy is called hydro energy. Hydro energy seems to be very, very eco-friendly. You make the dams and then use that energy which is stored in the dams to produce the electricity. But there is a problem with hydro energy also. These large-scale hydro energy projects, they ultimately damage a lot of ecological area. What you have to do is you have to stop the water at a particular point. Then the lake develops behind that stoppage. Basically, at the dam, behind the dam, the lake is developed, and hundreds of square kilometers of area gets submerged into water. Just imagine how much of the life form over there gets destroyed. The water which was not there because of the rise in water levels, the water enters the dry areas, and slowly a huge area gets submerged. The plants, which are basically normal plants, not water bearing plants, the animals, the small reptiles, the other mammals which are living in the burrows and all those, ultimately the entire life form gets destroyed. Okay, that damage is only once, but that's a damage. Ultimately, it's an impact on the environment of the particular area, but it's a one-time damage. So, although hydro energy is renewable, it is also eco-friendly, but it comes at a cost. The cost is the destruction of the ecology of that area. So this is the fourth form of energy, but it gives good results in the end. It runs for 40-50 years without any problem. So then fifth one is the geothermal energy, and sixth one is tidal energy. They are not yet popular, but I'll just touch upon them so that we understand that this is also available. Now, under the surface of Earth, at many places, there is a lot of heat stored by way of a molten lava or any other hot material present there, and it can be tapped by making drills, by making bores, and the water trapped in that area starts giving you the steam because of lava which heats water. And that can then be used in any form. Maybe a steam can be used for running a generator or can be used in any other form. But it is not spread across. There are very few pockets in US, California, Finland, and if somebody has gone to in Himachal Pradesh, when we go to Manali, there's a place called Kullu before that. There you can see our very own geothermal energy. There's a place where there is a hot water coming up on the surface continuously. It's basically the geothermal energy, which is right there on the surface of the earth there. But commercially, it is yet to catch up. And then the sixth form is the tidal energy. The tides which are there, the high tides, which basically bring a lot of water to the surface of the land, that energy is also tapped. There are prime movers which are used, which ultimately generate electricity, but they have not yet been into the commercial use. So I would just go back to my first two sources of energy for a little more explanation. I hope I'm on time. So we come back to these two forms of energy. Now, these two forms of energy are actually catching up very fast in the world. I'll also come to the data of how we are progressing in these. Now, the biggest challenge in these two, I'll just quickly touch upon. First of all, I told they are intermittent, they are not continuous. Second, you need vast areas of land, as you can see in the solar park. Very small. I mean, 1 megawatt of a solar park requires almost 4.5 acres of land, which is a huge requirement. Although the technology is improving, you can probably in maybe 10 years to come, in the same 4.5 acres, you may be able to generate 2.5 megawatts of energy. But as of today, we can produce only about 1 megawatt in 4.5 acres of energy. Now, so this is a big challenge as far as solar energy is concerned. Now, the problem is we have, if we consume land, then we have less of, agricultural area left with us. Now, if you look at the wind energy, you can see, the wind turbines are standing in the open area inside a maybe wind, in a normal agricultural land, and they look beautiful. But they have their own complications. This is very, very site specific. You cannot set up wind farm anywhere. There are pockets where the wind is very high, and there only you can put up these wind farms. So why I'm repeating these things is that there are huge challenges which are there for the renewable form of energy, but we cannot give up because we know the impact of a conventional form of fuel, which we have to ultimately do away with in the years to come. So now I'll touch upon a little bit of where we are right now in particularly in wind and solar energy, because these are going to form the base of the energy which will be available maybe 70-80 years down the line. Now, the total capacity, if you see the worldwide capacity of wind energy is about 650 gigawatts. China is leading with 221 gigawatts, followed by USA, which is 96 gigawatts, Germany, which is 59 gigawatts, India, which is 35 gigawatts, Spain, and then others put together is 215 gigawatts. Now, the point to be noted, there's another thing which comes up over here when we talk about wind and solar energy. Now, India has 35 gigawatts against a conventional, which I have not written over here, but I'm just explaining as to how much we have to catch up. We have almost 2,000 gigawatts of the conventional form of energy installations, like thermal power plants, gas-based power plants, or even hydro-based power plants put together. It's almost against 35, we have 200 gigawatts of installations. Now, India has to catch up a lot if we really want to do away with the conventional power plants. A lot. Whereas Germany, with its 59 gigawatts, is almost there. They have virtually replaced 80% of their conventional power plants, and they are sitting very pretty. And maybe another 5 years, they will be totally on renewable energy, and they will not be consuming any conventional form of energy. So India, although seems to be very good, very well placed, but then the population that we are having is 135 crores, requires, instead of 35 gigawatts, we would require maybe another 5 years, we'll be requiring total of 300 to 350 gigawatts. So a lot of catching up has to be done by India, a lot of catching up. Why I'm sharing this thing is when we go, you are the future of the country. When you go to the actual business of the world or business of India or the actual working place of the India, we should be sensitive about this particular aspect, that ultimately we have to replace all the conventional forms of energy with renewable energy. And the biggest opportunity which is available to us is wind and solar energy, because all other forms of energy, we don't have that kind of a potential. Now, I'll now touch a little bit about the solar energy. Solar energy, the total installed capacity is about 585 gigawatts, out of which China is again leading, 204 gigawatts, followed by USA with 75 gigawatts, Japan 63 gigawatts, Germany 49 gigawatts, and India 42.8 gigawatts. And others put together is about 150 gigawatts. Again, you see India is well placed. They are fifth, but in terms of the total requirement that we have, it's still a small share. So if you see, if I put wind energy and solar energy put together, it's about 80 gigawatts. To reach 300 gigawatts, we have to do a lot of work. A lot of work. A lot of support is required, not only from the government, but from the people in general. Because unless there is a willingness by the nation itself, this thing cannot be done. The people have to be sensitive to the requirement of renewable energy. Then only it can become a mass movement in the nation. Otherwise, it will not. Germany is very clear. Why I'm taking example of Germany is Germany has opposed any new installation of a normal conventional thermal power plant in the country since last 20 years. They are ready to sacrifice their additional requirement, but they would not permit any new conventional power plant in the nation. And as they have committed in next 10 years, they would be doing away totally with the conventional sources of energy in their country. So that takes me to the my last slide. That is the ever growing industries and the human population require new sources of energy in every walk of life. Thus, the future growth of the humanity will be largely driven by using renewable resources of energy. So that's my last slide, and I'll just say thank you in my last slide also. So that brings end to my session.
Thank you, sir. Sir, I had a question.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Sir, can you share, have you ever come across this concept of carbon credit?
Yeah. I mean, I didn't touch upon the details.
Yes, sir. Yes,
because
sir.
if I go into that will be a 6-7 hours of discussion. I just wanted to just touch base with the new generation as to where we are heading if we are not going into the renewable energy as the main option, not as an alternate option. Yeah, carbon credit is something basically what the thought process is. If you are able to use renewable energy in place of conventional energy, you will be given some kind of a commercial benefit or a financial benefit. So then the people came up with this concept, and these carbon credits are basically traded. If you replace a conventional form of energy in your system with a renewable energy, then you get certain credits, and that credits can be actually traded on a trade an exchange, and you get the money out of that. So this is what is called carbon credits, and in fact, my company is also doing it.
Okay, sir. Sir, also, I mean, I'm not clear about it, but wanted to have your opinion that whether private players can also enter into renewable sector in India. I mean, how hard it is or how easy it is. I know Suzlon, one company.
You will be you'll be surprised to know all the installations, the 35 gigawatts of wind and 42 gigawatts of solar. It is all by private players. Unlike the conventional thermal, where you have NTPC, you have National Hydroelectric Power Corporation, Thermal Power Corporation, or state electricity boards, where government used to fund the projects. All these projects which are there, these 80 gigawatts of projects which are up and running in India, they are all installed by the private players. Government only does one thing: they only buy the electricity from you, nothing else. But land has to be taken by the person who is setting up the project. All equipment manufacturing, all clearances, whether it is importing anything, their clearances from the port, every possible clearance which is required. There are about 25-30 clearances required to set up a project. All clearances have to be taken by that individual person for setting up a wind farm or a solar wind farm. So there is no government investment in terms of rupees. There is no government investment. Government is only taking from us the final product.
Sir, also wanted to have your opinion on pet coke, because pet coke is something which is generally comes as a waste from the oil distillation units from oil refineries. And many of the power plants have started also using pet coke apart from the coal, the conventional coal. Have you ever come across this pet coke thing, and how
No,
these power...
I've heard of pet coke, but I am not an expert on the, particularly the conventional power plants. But ultimately, if it is required to be burnt, I mean,
Yeah,
pet
it-
coke seems to be some kind of a byproduct of the petroleum.
Yes, sir.
Ultimately, if it is required to be burnt, it will
Yes.
only add to the greenhouse gases into the atmosphere.
Yes, sir. True, sir.
That is the only point I would like to make.
Because right now the refineries are facing massive problem as far as its disposal is concerned. I mean, this pet coke, which is why they end up selling these things to power plants, the captive power plants as well. I mean, the industrial power plants. and all
Yeah.
the-
Captive power plants are using pet coke. I agree with you.
Pet coke.
Only thing is, you say ultimately, if you use any fossil fuel, you will have a byproduct which will
Yes.
ultimately be harmful for the environment.
CO2 and methane are bound to go into the atmosphere. Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely, sir.
That was the main point as to why. I mean, I touched base about hydro as well as I touched base about the biomass also. Both
Yes.
are having some other impact on the environment, if not direct, it's an indirect impact. But wind and solar are the two energies where they are not having an impact on the environment. And therefore, they are going to form a major base. I don't know. I missed out one slide. Just a moment. I think I missed out one slide. Let me see. Or got deleted. Yeah, I actually I didn't explain it. But if you see, the point is, if we fully exploit, the available area. I'm sorry, I missed out because वो sharing का icon उधर आ जाता तो I missed it out. It's very interesting to see if we are able to exploit the entire wind potential. It can give 14 times the energy which is required at the moment by the entire world. It's a very interesting thing to see that if we can actually work very hard towards it and make sure have some kind of vision to remove all the conventional sources of energy from our life, we will be comfortable. We will be having huge amount of surplus energy available in wind as well as solar. Similarly, if you see solar, the potential which is available is so much that it can cater to 4 to 14 times of the total global demand of energy. Solar, why there is a variation from 4 to 14 is because because of the seasons like winter, summer, and rotation of the Earth. The area which is exposed to the sunlight during summers on the northern globe has got much bigger parcels of land, and therefore when there are summers in the northern globe, you will have more solar energy, but you cannot install so many solar parks on the sea surface. Therefore, it goes down to only 4 times the total energy requirement when it's winters on the north. So you see the amount of potential which is available. If we really, all of us, every person who thinks about it in the future, that my goal is to ultimately have only renewable energy in my life, in my usage, I think the opportunities are available. You know what is the issue? Which for some reason, even now these conventional sources are cheaper. Because these two technologies are yet developing, they are not yet into their peak, or they are not yet matured fully. So
Yes.
they are still costly. But the conventional power plants, the running cost is cheaper today. But people do not calculate the cost, the impact, the cost of the impact that it is going to have on the environment. So still you will find the lobbies in the world, like the big companies like Shell, who are basically there for only because they are selling petroleum products.
Yes,
So
sir.
there are big lobbies with a lot of money who throw their weight around and try to downplay the renewable energy, because otherwise their business will close down.
True,
There's
sir.
so many of them. Aramco of Saudi Arabia. They are
Saudi
selling
Aramco.
only oil. Saudi Arabia is only selling oil and nothing else. Their economy is only based on oil.
And sir,
So-
right now they are so much frightened because one day the oil demand is gonna go, and therefore they are extremely frightened. Almost all Gulf states are extremely dependent on oil.
Yeah, that's what I'm
Extremely
saying. But even today, there are lobbies who fight for these conventional sources because what they do is basically they show a carrot. You know that my
Yeah.
production cost is only say 3 rupees per unit, whereas the production cost of renewable energy is only 4 rupees per unit. But
Yeah.
nobody calculates the impact that conventional energy is doing on the environment. If you calculate the indirect costs, the loss of the habitat, the loss of the species, ultimately the global temperature rise of the surface of the earth, all these are huge impacts on the ultimately the survival of the humankind itself. But yes, it's a battle because the vested interests are already there, always there. The people are those who are having these, the vast resources of conventional energy. They have a lot of money also. They use the money to influence the decisions, and therefore the implementation is very slow in the renewable energy because there is a fight between renewable and traditional energy and the conventional form of energy.
Excuse me, sir. Sir,
Yeah.
one student have some questions. How
Yeah,
much?
please. Can you be a little loud?
Ji. Sir, how much energy can be supplied through renewable resources by year 2025? So, what do you think, as per your opinion, sir?
See, I am directly into the sector. I will give you a very, very, realistic picture.
Yes.
I don't see the growth to be very fast because despite a very visionary, target by our honorable prime minister, the support on the ground is not available. So I see, the installation as of today is a total of about 80 gigawatts. The honorable prime minister has set a target of 300 gigawatts, but I can't see it even. And maybe just about 130, 140 gigawatts would be the total installation of India by 2020.
Sir, is it because of the fact that photovoltaic cells are very costly, or India does not manufacture?
No, they are very cheap now. I mean, okay, we have an issue with China, which is temporary.
Yeah.
It'll be over maybe another 6-7 months. And that's not. I don't consider this as a factor. The fact is that it's not the limitation of the availability of photovoltaic cell. It is the problems that the people who are setting up the projects on ground are facing. The land acquisition is the biggest hurdle that we face when we set up these projects.
You mean the bureaucratic
For
hurdles?
20 megawatt requiring 100 acres, the land acquisition takes about 2 to 3 years. Just 100 acres. And there's so much of problem created not by the local people, it is created by the politicians.
Yes, sir.
They miss no opportunity to extract money from the people who are setting up these projects. It's a terrible situation on ground. The people actually don't convert the honorable prime minister's vision on ground. They don't convert. They have their own vested interests. Even now, today, I should not be talking about it in such a forum. I am struggling to get my projects going in one of the most promising states like Gujarat. A huge issue I am facing with the government for setting up the wind farm projects. I don't know to elaborate here, but this is how it is. Another very state where it was the fastest growing state for renewable energy till our honorable prime minister was the chief minister over here. But today we are just struggling to get even one single project going. So issues are not the technical. Technical issues can with a matter of time be overcome. But these are vested interest issues which I don't know how to overcome. That is why the reason of why I proposed this particular topic was that people should know where we are heading if we don't support the cause of renewable energy. It is if we are not, okay, maybe 50 years down the line, I may not be there, many other, but there'll be a generation who will be struggling, who will not have any resource in their hand to live. So we have to do it for our, the future generations to come. That should be the motto when we talk about renewable energy in our life. We have to carry it for we have to basically give it to our next generation.
More questions there. One student wants to ask one question. Which type of energy should be developed in future, sir? What do you think?
Can you please repeat? The volume was a little low, so I just increased the volume. If you can repeat your question, please.
Sure, sir. Just I will repeat. Sir, which type of energy should be developed in the future?
No, it has to be renewable. Certain countries, like what I said, I showed this wind energy and solar energy. I've shown you, certain countries don't have a very good solar energy potential. But, countries like Saudi Arabia, countries like Egypt, countries like Iraq, Iran, they have very good solar energy potential. Whereas, European countries like England, Sweden, these countries which have got a huge, coastline, they have this wind energy potential. So based on each country's potential, you can just develop that particular source of energy. Maybe India is blessed because we have both a huge coastline which we can use for wind energy development and a huge land surface where we can actually develop the solar energy. So we must focus at least on wind and solar energy in next 15-20 years to remove as much of conventional energy as possible.
Thank you. So nice of you, sir.
Hello, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, I wanted to ask you that have you listened or gone through like pyrolysis of plastic?
No, actually,
as a renewable resource.
No, I have not.
I will just give you a hint. Like it's an pyrolysis. Like we convert the conventional plastic and commercial plastic waste after pyrolysis into a biofuel, which was tested by me as a project in CRDI engine. So, what do you think that this can be used as a renewable energy?
No, it's a very good initiative. It's a very good initiative. If it can be taken on commercial level, it will become a very useful thing because it will ultimately help in removal of the plastic from our environment.
Yes, sir. So currently, sir, I was working on it for 2 years, and I had patented it in a Gujarat cell, like a renewable energy cell. Yes, sir.
Very nice.
So
Very nice.
I just wanted to know that if this pyrolysis comes to an renewable energy market, and the biofuel, as I tasted, it was on ratio of 60-40, like 40% petroleum and 60% which I used in engine testing. So do you think that this can take over petroleum in further 10 years?
I mean, it can replace. These fuels can partly replace. They cannot totally replace. It might replace about say 5% of the, or maybe 10% of the total fuel consumption. But I don't see it, totally removing the total requirement of say petrol or diesel. That may not happen actually. Because ultimately, that is also restricted by the amount of plastic waste that is getting created.
Yeah, yes, sir.
What I would like to say is it's a very good initiative, and even if we are able to reduce this conventional energy by 10%, we are ultimately contributing towards.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. The more we can create biofuel, like using the plastic waste, which is a sea waste. Because the algae which are formed in that plastic, they also act as an acidic material, which are good for pyrolysis.
Yeah, I've understood what you're saying. My only point is this: we must add whatever we can remove out of the conventional fossil fuel. We must, and it's a very good thing. If you are talking about 60-40 ratio, and that's a very good thing. And if you are able to remove even 6% of the conventional fuel by the biofuel, it will be great. Ultimately, it will add to whatever what I was saying. Like something is our conventional fuels are going to last between 50 to 100 years.
Yeah,
and if that gets prolonged, it will be good for us.
Yes,
definitely, very good initiative. Right. Very good initiative.
Thank you, sir.
Sir, I'm Priyanshu Mishra from HR.
Yeah, please.
So my question is that can we use renewable solar, we can say renewable energy like solar cells at our home to reduce our domestic consumption?
Yeah, it is already available actually. At that is basically called distributed network. In fact, I didn't want to go into those details, but it's a very valid point. Probably, I'll just deliberate a little bit on it. You can have a own small solar energy generating unit at your own residence. If you have a good roof, you can use it. Many offices, what they have done is they have put solar panels on their rooftops, and they are extracting energy out of it, and they replace, maybe they are not able to replace 100%, but I say even 30%, if they are able to replace the conventional energy, it is good enough. So this, in fact, the government is running a policy where they give you a subsidy if you want to set up such kind of a solar unit at your residence or even in your commercial complex. So it's already being done, and the government of Gujarat is actually promoting it. So if you need any support in terms of getting any information or actually getting the installation done, I can actually support you because I'm always in touch with that particular department. So, the government of Gujarat is setting up a target that at least so many households will be, provided with this kind of a solar rooftop solution where if for example, they are say consuming about say 10,000 units of electricity from the normal sources. Maybe if they are able to replace it by say 50% or 40%, even 30%, that is good enough. And for installing, there is some cost, maybe 2 lakhs, whatever. And, not only government of Gujarat, but the government of India also gives a certain subsidy on the total cost. Like if it's 2 lakhs, I'm just giving an example. Maybe you will get a subsidy of almost 90,000 put together, and that will become a very viable proposition. And it's now picking up a lot in Gujarat, and not only Gujarat, across the India.
Okay, sir. Thank you for the answer.
I think we have got lots of questions coming in from curious students, but then we are running short of time. So, sir, can we wrap up this session with your permission?
Yeah, sure. And it was great interacting with everybody. And I really thank the Parul University for giving me an opportunity to put up my thoughts particularly about the renewable energy, because that is the way going forward. Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir, for sharing all the technical details of renewable energy, with reference to India and Gujarat. However, many of the students had come up with really nice questions, and you have very much helped them to understand what exactly is happening in the industry, be it deforestation due to industrial growth, which had happened in last 30 years, wherein we are losing many species. As you said, like 83 species have gone extinct in last 20 years. So be it, the decrease of fresh water by 9%, or, be it increase in the global temperature or the level of the sea. So many new insights you have given us, and I hope that all of us, if we do our own small bit to contribute to the ecosystem, definitely we can very much convert and get lots of renewable energy in the coming years. Thank you so much for considering this platform to share your valuable information and industry experience with all of us here. And I hope the participants might have also understood a little bit about the things which are coming up, the struggles, and how we need to work on sustainable environment, and what all things are happening in the industry. On behalf of Parul University Faculty of Management Studies, so I would extend my gratitude for being here and sparing your valuable time. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sapnaji. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
All the participants also, and have a good day and happy Teachers' Day to all of you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, sir.
Okay.
Have a good day, sir.